Welcome to the ninth episode of Sound On. This week we have to discuss. Okay, we start. Have decided not have. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the ninth episode of Sound On. This week we have decided to discuss a topic that is more relatable to everybody, which is about what we describe ourselves. Do we consider ourselves to be introverts, or do we consider ourselves to be extroverts? Or rather, are we also unsure of that? Do we think that we are somewhere in between, perhaps an introverted extrovert or an ambivert? So therefore, in fact, we are going to cover areas such as, do introverts find it harder to climb up the social ladder in society? And do extroverts really have it easy in life? Therefore, we are pleased to have Zhi Yin with us to discuss this topic with us. So, Zhi Yin, how are you, and could you introduce yourself to our audience who might not know you yet?
Okay. Hi guys, I am Zhi Yin. I am a first year undergraduate student at the University of Sheffield. And yeah, happy to be here today on Sound On podcast. And I've been doing fine so far. Yeah, it's a summer break, so just hanging around. At the same time, just try to balance my social and work because I'm actually currently interning right now.
It's good to know that you're doing all right. You're doing great, and you're preoccupied with your internship and all that. So, because this is a topic that was, I think this idea came from Melissa. This topic, like introverts versus extroverts. What does it mean to be an introvert, in your opinion?
So, to me, I guess it depends on like how a person recharge themselves. So, for an introvert, they would prefer to recharge by spending time alone, especially like after a day of human interaction. Then unlike extroverts, where I guess they regain energy from social interaction. So that's what introverts and extroverts are to me.
So personally, I think that there's a difference between being an introvert and being shy. So I think that, like Zhi Yin said, introverts, they feel the best when they are in less stimulating environments, whereas extroverts, they feel very stimulated when they are very, very comfortable when they are in overstimulating environments. So personally, I would consider myself an introvert because since young, I've realized that I prefer like not talking when I'm in social situations. But then I realized that I think there are two types of extroversion. So one is that one type would be people who like to go out and to get themselves into social situations, whereas the second type is those who maybe they like going out or they don't mind going out, but when they do go out, they talk a lot, like they are the life of the party, And then I realized that okay, maybe the second type is the first type is that they are an extrovert, but they are just shy, meaning that they like going out, but when they go out, they don't speak out. So I think that's me. So like, I think there's a difference between not wanting to go out and also being shy. So yeah, what about you guys? Like, what do you think? Do you guys think that you are introverts or extroverts?
Actually, that's a question that I've often asked myself. I actually don't quite know, because a lot of people would say that I'm quite extroverted because apparently I talk a lot, which perhaps is kind of true, I think. But the thing is that it often, for me, it's kind of like, it really depends on the kind of situation I am in. So I think that I'm very extroverted with people that I'm comfortable with and people that I know rather well, or people that I know are really friendly. On the other hand, if I'm meeting somebody that's new, I take quite some time to actually warm up to them. So in that regard, I could be perhaps an introvert. So that's why I'm not quite sure. So I think that I'd place myself somewhere in the middle, because I think that I'm somebody, like, even if somebody I don't know, I can keep a conversation going. I can like make jokes. I can laugh with someone that I'm not that close to yet. But at the same time, I think like inside, like in me, I just feel a bit like perhaps a bit shy as well. So yeah. But of course, like being shy is not necessarily someone who is introverted. So yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Zing? What do you think?
So I agree to Mel, where she mentioned that a lot of people do associate a shy person to an introvert, but I don't think so. So in my case, I feel like I'm an introvert, but I am not shy at all. So I do enjoy socializing with people. So I'm more of the type where I just like to socialize and spend a lot of energy by interacting with others. But I really need time alone to recharge myself at the end of the day. Yeah. So maybe through social interaction, my energy might be drained throughout the day. Yeah. So I would identify myself as more of an introvert. Yeah.
So I think like what Chris said just now, like you said that you are in between, right? So I think that introversion and extroversion is not like black or white, you know. I think it's like a spectrum. So a lot of people like they lie somewhere in the spectrum, but I think there is no one who is 100% introvert or 100% extrovert. So everyone lies somewhere along the scale. So I think it's more of like, where are we on the spectrum? And like personally for me, I think also one more thing is that I think that we can change as like when we are in different environments or when we are at different points in our life. So for example, for me, I think I was much more of an introvert previously, like maybe like in high school or something. But then when I moved on to college and university, I slowly started to realize that I'm transforming into a little bit more of an extrovert. So I think now I lie somewhere in the middle because I did some personality. You know, online there's a lot of like personality tests and stuff, right? And I lie like quite like almost 50% like in the middle. I don't know how accurate the tests are, but like I lie 50% lah. So yeah, so like, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that your experiences in life have changed you to be more of an introvert or an extrovert? Yeah, maybe we can start with Chris.
I think that we all actually change. I think in the sense like how introverted or how extroverted we are. For me, I think that I've certainly changed. I would think that I was a lot more extroverted when I was younger, because when I was younger, I think that I found it a lot more easier to like talk like with basically anybody, and I could socialize. I wouldn't say not socialize, sorry, but like I didn't really feel like there is a difference between how comfortable I am between one person or the other. However, like right now, after some years in school and all that, I think that because I'm more conscious about the environment that I'm in, I'm more conscious about the people that I talk to and interact with. I think that I've kind of mellowed down a bit. I think I've decided to be more, I should say, more cautious of what I say, more cautious of the environment that I'm in. So in that regard, perhaps I've kind of like toned down a bit. So potentially I would say that perhaps I've become a little bit more introverted. But, you know, if you want to consider like introversion or extroversion, if you want to consider it as a spectrum, like you've said, basically, like it's like a scale, I would place myself somewhere in like, so 1 being introverted, most introverted, and like 10 being most extroverted. I think I'll place myself somewhere on like 6, for example.
So like 50%.
But back then, I think that was probably like an 8 or 9. So probably about 50%. Yeah, that's what I would think. But you know, some people would think otherwise.
Okay, how about you, Zane? Like, do you think that you have changed?
So yes, in a way. I've actually taken the personality test that Melissa mentioned just now. I know there are a lot of types of personality tests out there, but yeah, I would say my results came out was more of like a 60% introvert and 40% extrovert. And growing up, I always thought I was an extrovert. So maybe over the years as I mature, I don't know, just basically personal experiences changed me to maybe leaning more towards the introvert side of me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of similar to me. Yeah, because I think that, I don't know, I think as we grew up, right, I think that perhaps we feel like there is a need to restrain ourselves, especially depending on the person that you're with, because, you know, the people that you're with actually, I don't know if you guys feel that way, but it's really like how comfortable you are with people actually changes depending on who the person is. So I think that could affect how introverted or extroverted you are with that individual as well.
Yeah, I think like, okay, so for you guys, right, you feel that you have gotten more introverted throughout the years, right? But I think for me, it's like opposite. So for me, I felt like I became more extroverted, and actually mostly when I entered uni, because I don't know if you guys can relate to this. So like actually not many people know this about me because I don't really talk about it, but I have like serious FOMO, like fear of missing out. It's like really intense. So like when I go out, right? So I always go out because I feel it's because of social pressure. I feel like I have to go out, and also because of my FOMO. And I think this pressure has sort of slowly transformed me into an extrovert, where I'm mostly out and not at home. And also like I find that I'm more extroverted when I'm in uni, like when I'm studying in the UK, compared to when I'm at home. Because I think when I'm at home, I'm more comfortable, so I don't mind like staying at home because I have my family and stuff. But then when I'm in the UK, I feel like, because I feel more alone, and maybe I don't feel. I mean, I do feel at home in Sheffield, but I just feel like I think I'm more. I feel like I'm more likely to go out, which is why in UK I think I party more often compared to here. Here I don't really go out because I just feel like I don't need to. Whereas in UK I feel like, okay, the friends I have around me are my only support system over there. So I feel like I always need to go out, right? And also bringing social media into this conversation, right? I feel like social media has also brought up this social pressure for us to be constantly out socializing, because like for example when we post like a story on Instagram, for example, like you more often see people posting stuff when they are out with their friends and stuff. They don't post stuff when they are alone in their room, right, most of the time. So yeah, I think that also creates a pressure. Like for me, when I see like online, like, for example, like on a Friday night, I see all my friends are out. And then when I'm at home alone on a Friday night, I'm like, oh, is there something wrong with me? So like, yeah, I don't know if you guys feel that way, because I feel like social media is like a constant stimulation. So and always like extroversion is always an image of happiness that we see on social media. So yeah, what do you guys think? Like, do you think that social media pushes the society to be more extroverted?
Yeah, I would think so, actually. I mean, with what you've mentioned about, even if let's say you see stories of people going on Friday night and you're at home, you feel a bit weird. I think that's how I feel as well, to a certain extent. Sometimes it really depends on who it is, though. So if my group of friends decides to like go out on a Friday night, and if I'm not informed about it, I think I'd feel a bit left out. So I think that's, in that regard, that's perhaps my extroversion, or in the sense that that's me wanting to actually socialize. But for me, actually, I don't really get too disturbed or affected by seeing people going out on a Friday night when I don't, because more often than not, it is me choosing not to go out on a Friday if I'm at home, if you get what I mean. But the thing is that there is a limit to how long I can just like not go out on Friday night. So I think 2 weeks is probably the maximum. I think after that, I'd want to go out, as you guys would probably know, based on the activities that we do in university. So yeah, so it really depends, actually. But I get what you say about not wanting to miss out, because like it's for me as well. Like I don't want to miss out on those parties and all that. Like if I'm free, I'd definitely go. Or in fact, there are many instances in which I tell myself I don't want to go, but in the end, I get convinced to going out. Or when I remain firm in not wanting to go out, I'm just constantly like refreshing my Instagram, wanting to see what people are doing. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually agree with both of you, because sometimes I do feel this pressure to go out as well. Even though I do really like to go out, but yeah, sometimes when I really feel like not feeling like I want to interact with anyone, it's still really hard to say no to your friends sometimes. You know, of course you're a university student. Of course you want to make the best out of it. So I always carry this mindset that you have to push yourself, go out of your comfort zone to like interact with others, or even just hang out with your friends, because you only have one university life. You only experience this once in your life. So just push yourself. But at the same time, if you really feel like that you don't have the capacity anymore to just hang out with your friends, I think it's all right to just say no. Yeah, but of course, this is easier said than done. So yeah, I think even up till now, I struggle with that. learning how to say no.
So let's move the discussion a little bit with regard to say society as a whole, or our life as students, basically. So I think that many people will actually say that there is a bias towards extroverts in a society, especially in these modern times. For instance, Melissa brought up the idea of social media. So that is what is meant by how social media actually has allowed a lot of extroverts to thrive in society. So let's start with Melissa then in this topic then. Do you actually think that schools and workplaces are designed for extroverts to thrive? For example, when we talk about group assignments, do you think that introverts tend to be overwhelmed in group assignments? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. Because like even in schools, like even from my personal experience, like we are always encouraged to work in groups, like have group assignments. And for example, in school, like when there's the parents teachers day or something, like there's always this constant feedback about me that teachers give me, and they always say that I'm too quiet or I'm too introverted. And I think that that feedback, like over time, it builds in our mind, and it makes us think like, oh, is there something wrong with being quiet? Like, is there something wrong with being an introvert? Which is why I felt that there is definitely a bias in our society for extroverts, because we always favor extroverts, right? And I think it's also in our minds as well, because I think we are more gravitated towards extroverts and charismatic people. So I think it's quite common for us to like extroverts more, or at least people who are very friendly, very talkative, compared to introverts, those who like stay quieter. So yeah, and I think even not just in schools, I think when this happens in schools, right, it also develops into like our process of growing up, because this mindset that being an introvert is not a good thing. So I think that this develops into workspaces as well, where in offices, right, I think those who speak up a lot, they often overshadow those who don't speak out as much. And I think when leaders are being chosen, we also tend to choose those who are more extroverted, louder and charismatic. And not just leaders, but also like when you're choosing someone to be promoted in a team, for example. So yeah, so I think that there's also this study that I came across which said that introverts tend to be better leaders, because they have the time to they know how to take time off to let their minds think in a quiet space. But I don't know if that's a biased study, because I saw the study from an article which was trying to tell everyone that being introvert is not a bad thing. So it's probably a biased study, I don't know, but I think it's potentially accurate. And I think that it's not bad to normalize liking extroverts, but it's also important to know when to let introverts have their time off and get their minds going, even though it's like in a confined space with no group assignments and stuff.
Yeah, what is your take on this then, Zhi Yin? As someone who's leading a society right now, for example, a university society, I mean like a MESOP, for example, do you feel like as if introverts perhaps might have a fear of like speaking out, perhaps in the workplace, in like a meeting environment, for example?
So I guess relating back to what Melissa mentioned about like there's this bias as leaders being extroverts. Extroverts are better off as leaders. I guess there's some truth behind that, because I do believe that extroverts carries traits that stands out. So like they might come off as more confident, expressive, dominant, and unlike introverts, I guess. So as a person that's leading a society right now, I can relate to that, because I may not be always the dominant one. So maybe it might come off as I might not have this, leader kind of image. Yeah. So that's what
I think that's a very good point that you raised. In fact, it's actually very much linked to what Melissa mentioned about how introverts often are not chosen to become leaders, or they're not they're often not the first choice to become promoted. I mean, it's not necessarily the case across the board, but it happens very often that because people are drawn towards extroverts, because they have this larger than life character, so they tend to be promoted because they're not only just liked, but people feel like as if they have this ability to stem the authority. And this is actually why I mentioned at the introduction whether or not do introverts actually have it hard in life, or rather do extroverts find it easier in life. Because so let's talk about introvert that's being promoted, for example. So let's say even if an introvert is being like promoted, like when their introverted character is exposed, they often become very weakened about it. And it's often the case in public life. So we have like figures who lead very public lives in whatever field, say NGOs, government and stuff like that, or even corporations, for example. When these introverted characters are being promoted, they step up to the plate, they do their job as much as they can, but they often become weakened in this modern society, in this digital society, because very often social media plays a huge role in leadership. Like we see social media being the tool that is being used to promote people, promote ideas, and what a company is doing or what a party is doing and stuff like that. And when that happens, right, introverts often find it harder with this social media environment, because social media is very brutal. Because it's like when introverts are not comfortable being in front of a camera, for example, that would weaken their position of strength. So they could be very good leaders behind the scene, but they don't look as someone that is strong, someone that is assertive, someone that can interact well. And that actually dents their credibility in a sense. For example, I mean, it would be plausible to think that introverts are more uncomfortable with the spotlight. And in this social media environment, right, like in fact, like even leaders, if they're introverted, they can be accused as being robotic in front of a camera. They could be accused of being awkward, shy, unfriendly, and humorless. So that are considered as bad traits in this digital age. So the point I'm making is that I think that introverts do find it a lot harder to climb in social life at times, because even if they're very capable in what they do, they don't seem to portray that image of strength that we want to see.
Yeah, I think that I think you mentioned about being likable as a leader, right? So I think it is very important to be likable, and I think that charisma is a very important trait as well. Like you have to know how to be charismatic. And I think even though you're an introvert, so I think that we shouldn't judge people based on how, for example, how they portray themselves in front of a camera. So like just because someone is shy in front of camera doesn't mean that this person isn't a good leader, for example. But I think that is our mindset that has been ingrained for many, many years, where we are more gravitated towards people who are like sociable, people who are comfortable in front of the camera and in public. So I think that as an introvert myself, I think one thing that would help me is I think to train. I think there are a lot of self-help resources online where we can train how to be more charismatic. Actually, there's a YouTube YouTube channel called Charisma on Command. I think I've mentioned it before, like in a few videos back. So it's just like these two guys. I think it's this guy. His name is Charlie. So he just like shares in his videos about how to be more charismatic in daily life. And then he also talks about how many leaders who are very visibly introverts, they often get a lot of hate groups and a lot of like controversies. Like for example, I think Bill Gates, right? So I think it's quite obvious that he's very uncomfortable in front of the camera. Like so like in the video, like they break down all the things that he does that makes it very visible that he's uncomfortable in front of the camera. For example, like how he moves his hands, how he doesn't have any facial expressions. So like, and because of that, there are like conspiracy theories going around that Bill Gates is like a bad person and like he created the coronavirus, which is like really dumb. But yeah, so I think that all this can just come out of a place where this person is just not charismatic enough and not likable enough. So I think that it's very important for us to know how to, because I think we should embrace our introvertness, but it shouldn't be an excuse for us not to train ourselves to be to be more charismatic in public so that we can actually seem likable. I think seeming likable is actually a very important trait and something that people see, and it really influences our daily life, whether it's like in school, in uni, or in the workplace. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point because you talked about how you mentioned earlier on about that you saw this study that basically says that introverts are said to be better leaders, perhaps because potentially they're more intelligent. But I do think that there is a possibility that that is accurate because there's often this divide between, say, sayers versus doers. So, someone that's very larger than life, larger than life character, very extroverted and all that, is not necessarily a doer. Like he could potentially just be a sayer. I mean, what I'm saying is that perhaps a balance would be good. If let's talk about like a team, for example. If you have like a mixture of like extroverts versus introverts in the team, I think that that's actually a very good balance because you could argue that if you want to associate like sayers with extroverts, like for example, the sayers could be the ones providing ideas, brainstorming and all that, whereas the doers, if you'd like to associate those with like introverts, they can potentially act on those ideas better. But I think that it's actually very difficult to actually draw a distinction between whether extroverts better leaders or introverts better leaders, because I think that it actually really depends more on the character, if you get what I'm saying. So what are your thoughts on this, Zhi Yin?
I would say that there should be a good balance of sayers and doers in a team. Because like, although this is something we can't control, like in terms of having this amount of extroverts or this amount of introverts in a team, like we can't control that. So I think what's more important is a matter of compromising. So basically it means like having the conscious effort to let others speak, to let the others speak if you're an extrovert, and also speaking up more often if you're an introvert. So yeah, I think that's even more important regardless whether you're an extrovert or introvert in a team lah. Yeah. And also I do agree with Chris about what he said, like no matter the bias whereby where extroverts are better as leaders, I feel like wherever side are you on in the spectrum, it's more important to embrace your leadership capabilities. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, actually, yes, that's a very good point. Actually, I think that because in terms of say having a good balance between introverts and extroverts, right? You mentioned like compromise. I think that the introverts could potentially be more of like the people that are able to like bring maybe all sides together in perhaps a team, for example. Because if you have a team in which everybody is so like strong-headed, with a lot of strong opinions and all that, it might be very difficult to bridge the differences, I think. But it also is very, very important to note that a lot of extroverts, I think most extroverts, in fact, a lot of them are also doers because they do have this capacity to actually get things done because they have leadership qualities which include being able to bring people on board and on side. So it is important to know that a lot of extroverts are also very good doers. In fact, there are many introverts who also can be sayers and not as good of a doer as well. But that is the thing. It's actually very difficult to actually like associate like an extrovert with poor leadership or good leadership skills and an introvert with bad leadership skills or good leadership skills for that matter. I think that like Melissa brought up the idea of like the point on Bill Gates just now. Like, yes, that is in the corporate world. So people actually think that he's quite introverted. Some people argue that perhaps he's a bit awkward, for example. And that is a problem that also happens in like political life or public life, for example. I think that a very good example would be, say, because we're in 2020 now, Hillary Clinton, for example. People all said that she was a bit awkward in front. She's awkward. She's a bit robotic, some people would argue, that she's not comfortable with people. So a lot of people found it very difficult to actually say vote for her because they don't think that she could be a very good leader. But as we all probably know, that that's probably not a very good assertion because she has a track record which has shown that she has a capacity to lead. So it is very dangerous when we start associating leadership skills to character traits, if you get what I mean. But all in all, I think that the point of society having a propensity towards choosing extroverts to be leaders, I think that introverts need to be given the chance as well. People should not withdraw their, I should say, their confidence in a leader just because they find out that he or she is introverted, because I don't think that this character determines their skill or their ability to lead. But of course, it does make a difference, because if you are an introvert and if you want to lead, you need to be able to speak out as well. Speak up, if not, people won't listen to you.
Yeah, I think that, okay, so one more thing that I realized was that I think a few months ago, I actually attended this workshop on assessment centers. So when companies recruit these days, there are like many levels of like interviews and stuff, and assessment centers are one of it. So they see how you work as a group, right? So for me, at the back of my mind, I'm always like, okay, how am I gonna do well in my this assessment center thing, because I really hate like speaking up in groups. But then what the people said in the training was that you don't have to speak out. Like the companies don't only choose those who talk a lot, because like in a room where everyone is talking and no one is listening, right? Then what's the point if no one is listening? So yeah, what they said was that you don't need to peacock. Like you don't have to like show that, oh, you have the best ideas, and you don't have to be all fighting to speak at the same time. But
absolutely,
yeah, but you can also be the one who listens. And also one thing that companies really like is that if you, for example, for me, if I don't really have any ideas to say, I don't have to like, I shouldn't like just simply say something for the sake of saying something to be noticed. I can also like point out person A, for example, who hasn't said anything. I think they like it when you point out that someone hasn't been saying anything and you ask for their opinion. So if you see that this person hasn't been saying anything, you can say like, oh, what's your opinion on this? So that's what they said. They said companies really like that. So I think the point that I'm trying to bring across here is that you don't have to stand out. You don't have to constantly be talking, but you have to, at the same time, know how to get your points across, but you just don't have to be constantly talking, especially when you have nothing to say.
So actually, adding on to what Melissa said, right? I feel like in these modern times, I guess there is a rising appreciation towards introverts. That's just from my personal opinion, and like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think we can lead what the both of you have just said about back to like introversion versus the fear of missing out, which is what was brought up earlier on in the discussion. Because I mean, we all have established the fact that in this age, for instance, there is a lot of social pressure for us to be constantly out socializing, and there's always I think we kind of like put up that thought that extroverts tend to be more active in social media. Like social media is designed for these people to actually thrive, especially in like public life and all that. But I think that it's also important to know that actually, for all of the ills that social media has, I think that they have also kind of like provided a safe space for introverts to actually voice out, for introverts to actually speak out, because social media has actually been it's actually a very good tool for introverts to actually let loose. Because I mean, like we see, I think that we can often in our daily lives, like people that we know, I think that there are a lot of introverted people, or people who are just relatively quiet. They don't say much when you see them in person, but they're actually really active on social media. So I think that it's important to note that social media can be a safe space for people who think that they are a bit introverted as well. But also, I think that it is also worth noting that this could be a bit problematic in the long term, because it would be reasonable to think that there would be more to miss out in real life than just constantly just doing your thing on social media.
Yeah, I think that I think what you said about those people who are quiet in real life but are very loud on social media, right? I think in high school we used to call them like keyboard warriors or something, which they're not really looked very highly upon, which I think shouldn't be the case, because like, maybe they just don't know how to speak out in real life, so they take their opinions onto the internet instead, right? So yeah, like Chris said, although that that may not be the best way in the long run. But I think it's about knowing how you can, knowing your sweet spot, like knowing where you are comfortable with speaking out your opinions. So I think recently, like, I shared my story on Kita about how I'm an introvert, so I created this podcast channel so that I can share my opinions to the public. So yeah, I think that is one of the ways that that's one of an example where how I don't always speak my opinions in real life. So I think everyone should, if anyone else feels the same way, I think we should just find how we are comfortable in voicing out our opinions.
I actually do know people like introverts that don't really speak up in real life, but on social media they are quite like active in voicing out their opinion, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So what you just find a method or maybe a platform to voice out your opinion which makes you comfortable. Yeah. So as for me personally, I like to just spend time alone and just reflect on myself, because I'm more of a introspective kind of person. Yeah. So which means that I like to reflect on myself at the end of the day. Yeah, that's what I do usually.
That's actually a very good trait. I don't think that's a bad trait at all, because I think that self-introspection is actually a very good thing. Like you saying that you look back at what you do during that day, for example, because you're more of an introspective kind of person. I think that's a good trait, because if we don't actually just take some time off and reflect on what we've been doing, I think that we are less likely to actually realize, we're less likely to actually improve ourselves, but less likely to realize perhaps the mistakes that we do. So I think that's quite, for me personally, I think that is also the case for me. I do like time off on my own sometimes. I'm somebody that can actually basically just go like 1 week not meeting anybody. I'm actually someone that can actually do that, and I think that gives me the opportunity to recharge. But of course, there's a limit to how long I can be alone as well. I think like 2 weeks is probably my maximum.
Yeah, exactly. I think like it could be detrimental in the long term to your own mental illness as well. If you just like keep everything to yourself, it can be pretty hard on one person's mental health.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I think talking about mental health, right, I think we can relate this back to COVID-19, because I think that, COVID-19 is like our normal now. Like, we can't talk about anything without bringing up COVID-19, right? So I think because of the MCO or the lockdown or whatever you want to call it, because we were all stuck at home, and I think it has given us a lot of time to listen to our thoughts. And I think for some people it was okay, but I think there was also a very sharp increase in mental health issues because of this lockdown. So what do you guys think? Like, do you think that these mental health issues are more of a problem for extroverts during the lockdown?
I'm not too sure about that actually, because I'm no like expert in this field. But if I were to like just look at the kind of like character traits that you actually brought up, I think that potentially perhaps extroverts would have found it a lot harder during COVID-19, because they're more used to meeting people. They often feel this urge to like go out, I guess. So in that regard, they could be struggling more because of COVID-19, especially during the lockdown period, which fortunately is over right now. But I think that introverts also suffer themselves, because like I said, like introverts have their own social life as well. They could be introverted, like you mentioned earlier on, but they still like to go out socializing and all that. So I think that they also suffer just as much. But on a balance, perhaps, I would think that extroverts would be more likely to actually have found it harder during the lockdown. But correct me if I'm wrong. But then I do think that like social media has actually alleviated this problem, in the sense that people have been able to basically continue like socializing through like Skype, Zoom, and stuff like that. So I think that actually technology has basically made it a lot easier for everybody, be it extroverts or introverts. But of course, like in friendships, like meeting people in person is actually a lot more important. I think it feels better. So in that regard, I would think that extroverts perhaps would have found it harder.
I think that I'm not sure how true how true it is whether like the COVID-19 is like causing mental illness to extroverts more. I'm not too sure, but relating to what I've experienced, because I know I'm an introvert, right? But at first I was pretty okay with being alone in a confined space, but I guess after a long period of just spending time alone, I guess that's where my extrovert side of me comes into play. So that's why like relating it back to what we mentioned earlier, it's very true that everyone has a mix of both. So it just depends on the situation you're in, whether your extrovert side of you will come into play or your introvert side of you will come into play. So
yeah, I think just to wrap it up, right? To conclude our discussion today, I think we talked more about embracing our introversion, but at the same time, being an extrovert is not wrong, obviously. So there's no shame in choosing to do your own thing instead of hanging out with friends, and also the other way around. And also, when we talked about how society has a bias towards extroverts, I think society should also give introverts their space to be themselves. And because when we shut down 50% of the society, we are missing out on 50% of the ideas that we can bring up, right? So we should give introverts the space to come up with their own solutions and ideas. And at the same time, it's also important for us to unplug from social media once in a while to let our thoughts run, because at this time there's so much stimulation everywhere. Even when you're alone in your room, you're still somehow connected to the public through the internet and through social media. So it's very important to unplug. But at the same time, I know we talked a lot about how it's okay to be introverts, but it's also not an excuse not to develop. Is not an excuse to not develop your communication skills, because no matter how introverted you are, it's always important to know how to get your thoughts and your points across. And to do so, there are many resources online. There's like self-help books, articles, videos that we can use. And personally, I've been trying to do that as well, because I know that I'm an introvert. So yeah, so I think that is our takeaway message from this discussion.
The takeaway message, basically, like I think that basically I just like to add very finally over here, which is that I think that a good balance actually important. Like if you are an introvert, you should try to build up a bit of an extrovert character in order to basically not be drowned out in this society. But it is also important for people who are very extroverted, for example, to have this ability to basically cool down sometimes, take some time off. Because I think that time off is actually really important, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself. But all in all, I think that you should respect people's choices. So, for example, you should not just basically shun somebody just because they refuse to go out as much as you would want them to. So it's basically we need to actually embrace people for who they are, essentially. We should not feel that an extrovert is better than an introvert or vice versa, because there's obviously the pros and cons to both of it, and we should embrace the pros of it.
Yeah. Actually, can I add on?
Yeah,
sure.
So I would say, as much as it is very important for oneself to develop or embrace their own introversion side or extrovert side of them, I do think that it is also a responsibility for your surrounding people. So as friends or even as family members, it's really important to put in the conscious effort and also to understand your peers' personality. Yeah. So there's got to be a balance of both self-development and from a third-party perspective.
Yeah. So just to conclude, thank you, Zin, for joining us this episode, and we hope to have you again in our future episodes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Bye.